You are now listening to the highlight reel builder for authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer and author of the best-selling book, Stay the Course, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be getting some goodies today from the guest that's up next. And today on the Going North podcast, we're bringing some fabulous humans from across the globe. Today's no different. Heck, who am I kidding? Today's a different special occasion because we got one heck of a guest for you today. Because my goodness, we have had folks who've lived, my goodness, like so many lives in one. And today is one of those occasions because today's guest, an inventor, researcher, a military intelligence veteran, economist, systems developer, and outdoorsman. My goodness, give it up for Mr. GW himself, Mr. Gary Wietgrefe. How you doing today, sir?
Good, Dom. Thanks for hosting.
My pleasure indeed. My pleasure indeed. So my goodness, a life that is full of life. Pun unintended for that one.
Yes, we retired in 2012 from my wife and I, and we've been traveling for the most part since. And so we like to keep active physically, as well as I write books to keep active mentally.
That's good. That's really good. And what's even better is the fact that not only both you and your wife are writing books together, you actually took a trip, or at least you did a lot of heavy lifting with the trip, I believe, 5,000 kilometers, I believe, from South Dakota to Alaska.
Yeah, it's 3,000 miles, or most of the trip was in Canada, so I put it in kilometers, 5,000 kilometers, or just about 5,000 kilometers, and almost exactly 3,000 miles from Pierre, South Dakota to North Pole, Alaska, which is up by the Arctic Circle in central Alaska.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So what inspired you to take that trip? Was it something for health reasons? Was it just to challenge yourself? Because I remember I think it was for a couple of years before you turned 65. That was one of the bike trips you were itching to make.
Yeah, it's about 10 years ago now. We've met a guy that him and his brothers had biked to Alaska, and that kind of inspired me. And I go, when I turned 65 2 years ago, I go, why wait? It's time to either do it or hang up the bike. And my wife and I, both of our bikes were stolen the year before, and we recovered them. And they were 10-year-old bikes, but people said, including my wife, said, "Oh, you ought to get a new one." And I go, "No, this one's fine. I've been riding it. It fits me. I'm going to take it to Alaska."
That's good. That's good. Glad you're able to recover the bikes too. Definitely make that wonderful trip. So what's probably been three of the biggest lessons you learned from the trip? Because that's one heck of a long trek.
Yeah, 3 lessons. Wow. Most people just say, what's a lesson? Three lessons, Don. Let me start out this way, because your latest book, Going North, you took a different approach. You took an electoral approach to tips and techniques. And so you could say that as an agronomist, I looked at fields. I didn't wear earbuds or listen to music or anything. I listened to nature. And so that is 2 different things to pay attention to. Number one would probably be just the excitement of getting out every day and being motivated. I never once in that 40-day trip did I question myself whether I should be doing this. I just wanted to see what was out there every day.
Okay. Well, there you go. I love that one. Love that one. You just didn't question. You just really wanted to be out there every day. And heck, even I feel like that's something a lot of us have been lacking, especially with the year of 2020, where folks have been trapped in the houses for the early part of the year. Is that really just a lack of being around nature?
Well, it is. And I took this trip 2 years ago. But while my wife and I returned from Mexico in March, and I finished the book at a cabin in the Black Hills of Western South Dakota. And so we were isolated for 3 months. And I really tweaked it rather than, yes, there's elevation gains, distance, locations, things that a bicyclist would be interested in, nightly stops and how far it was, things like that, elevation. But this book is really tweaked to make it an armchair read. It's a fun adventure. So yes, I was isolated like everybody else, but I used that time to put my notes into a final form and release the book this summer. And so everybody has that opportunity. Yes, you can get out and walk your neighborhood. Most people can get out and bike their neighborhood. And that's what my wife and I have always done, is we leave for a Friday and go to a place over the weekend, or we just take daily bike rides. We've taken some longer rides. The longest was a 6-day ride. But I encourage people to get on your bike and bike to the next town, stay at a bed and breakfast, bike to a friend, stay overnight. It's a way of getting out and still, we'll say, enjoying your health as well as enjoying outdoors and experiencing something different rather than just your living room and TV.
Yes, indeed. You can say that again. So it really got you into really bike riding, because I'm pretty sure all your life you weren't thinking, you know what, I'm gonna ride bikes, especially once I get up there in age, to really keep myself young for a long time. Like, what really gave you that love for the outdoors?
Well, I grew up on a farm in north central South Dakota. And so for the most part, I've been active my whole life. When I was in military intelligence, I served in northern Japan. And rather than buying a car like I did over in Italy, I bought a new bicycle, and I biked the mountains in northern Japan during my breaks. And so I hung up my bike for 30 years or whatever, and got a new one 10 years ago. And I just started biking more and more. And yes, I'm an active bicyclist. Do I bike every day? Certainly not. I hadn't been on my bike in 8 months before I took off on this trip.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that detail, because most folks would be like, "What the heck is your problem? You got to get your body ready for something like that."
Well, if you don't get out of shape, you don't really have to get in shape. Now, I'll back that up, saying that I hike a lot, and so in where we were at in Mexico, the winter before, I helped clean jungle trails to make it easier for groups to hike the trails out in Sierra Madres. And so when I got back, we returned on Wednesday and I took off on Sunday. The only practice I had of biking, and I hadn't been on my bike since the summer before, I went to Walmart and bought a $12 odometer, and had ordered a GPS unit online, and put that on my bike and tested it 4.4 miles, so about 7 kilometers. And the next day, I took off for Alaska.
Okay, cool. That's the other detail I forgot. It's like, yeah, even though you didn't ride your bike for 8 months before the trip, you still kept yourself in shape and you still kept yourself active.
Yes, that's true. And I think if anybody attempts this ride or any distance ride, and for somebody that's just a casual around the block bicyclist, they may want to stick to 5 to 10 miles, their first overnight trip. I planned on roughly 50 to 60 miles the first week or so, just to, I had all day to do it. And so just to see if I could do it, if I could feel some joint pains or something like that might prevent it. But it was mainly to get in shape. So as I got into more remote areas like the Yukon, I mean, you're there, and I biked to a bit. I carried gear the first 2 weeks. My wife started out to stay back from Memorial Day, and then caught up with me in Western Saskatchewan. And from there, we continued. I put my bags in our vehicle, and she sought lodging and food, and I biked every day. So I had all day to do it. It did not like I had to be there by noon or something.
So there wasn't like one of those strict time limits, like, all right, 12 p.m. I gotta really be at this destination, this
No,
point right here.
no, I scheduled 2 months. I left on May 20th and I wanted to be in fact, I had reservations in Fairbanks, Alaska, the closest, we'll call it city to North Pole, and had reservations there on July 20th. So what surprised me is I got up every day. I took 2 days off the whole trip, once in rain day in Western Saskatchewan, and another day visit friends up in Alberta. But I got there 3 weeks early. I got there June 30th, left May 20th.
Nice. That's what I'm talking about. So is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often when you're being on interviews like this?
Hmm. Maybe is it a question or it's a topic of discussion that can this be used to motivate other people to stay physically active as well as write their notes. My book, Destination North Pole, 5,000 kilometers by bicycle, it sounds like an exercise bike or an exercise book. It's not. I stopped at historic markers up there. And so I described what I seen, what the area was like, what the people were like, what the scenery was like. Yeah. And so I would say if they ask me, I would like to describe this as a trip that anybody can take or a trip somebody can take that's different than this, but just do it on their own. And ask me the questions of how to prepare. And that's why I put appendixes in the book on what I colluded on my bicycle, what size was my bicycle, what attachments did I have.
Ah, solid right there, because that's something that a lot of folks really need. It's like, hey, you just need the exercise, both the mind and the body.
That's right. For example, I biked, and when I was biking, some days, different years, 30, 40, 50 miles, my wrist would get sore. And so I asked at bike shops for several years where I could, uh, what I could do to keep from getting sore wrists. And this is a common problem for distance bicyclers. And bike store gave me handlebar pads. They gave me padded, sold me padded gloves, padded handlebars. But that didn't solve the problem. Did it ease it temporarily? Maybe. But the day before I left, Saturday, I went to the local hardware store and bought some PVC, took my little bike stem and mounted what I call a wrist support bar. And it was a place where I could hold my hands on the handlebars and support my wrists. And it was made of PVC. So as I hit the bumps, it would take that shock out of it. So this is kind of a technical improvement that I think every distance bicycler could use. I have 6 patents, but I didn't patent this because I think it's probably the most practical thing I've ever come up with. And I biked 3,000 miles, it stayed together, and I didn't have sore wrists in 3,000 miles. And my longest ride was 166 miles in Saskatchewan. You hit bumps, you hit gravel, you expansion cracks in the concrete. They're just all kinds of things that can make that create a wrist problem. But I avoided that.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And that's really good. It's interesting you didn't even patent that one because that sounds like something that would be a hot commodity for those with long distance riders, like especially with the wrists.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's something that's described in my book. I talk about how I used it, how I mounted it. I have pictures of it in there. In the appendix, I describe what it contained, and so a bicyclist can pick it up. Those that are casually riding, are reading the book. It's an adventure. You don't care about them kind of thing. Oh, it's interesting, and you move on. And so I didn't write this book to get bogged down in details. I took that stuff out, and if it was important, I put it in the appendix. But this is something that just the average person looking for a fun book, looking to adventure from their own living room, can do for a few bucks. Way cheaper than going out, probably for a meal. And so they can enjoy it for several hours.
Ah, nice. That's what I'm talking about. So you mentioned you had 6 patents, and that speaks to your at least one of your many talents of being an inventor. So what inspired you to add that to your repertoire of things that you do? Was it like something inspired as a kid when you may have got acquainted with Legos, or was it something else?
Well, I was before Legos. I'll put it that way. We had
Yeah.
Lincoln Logs, I think they called it. Yeah. Actually, at work, I mean, I grew up on a farm, so you do innovative things just to keep machinery running and cattle moving the right way or whatever. And I was in the seed business. We were handling millions across the country, about 100 million soybean bags a year by our company and competitors. And I go, this is crazy. Not only bagging, but throwing away all these bags, and then 60 bags or 50 bags to a pallet, throwing it away. And so I worked with people in the company and developed a bulk handling system. And so that is a design patent. And then along with that, we got a trademark on the system, but I also developed some engineering patents to help with the clean out and keep identity preserved. And so that, and it's part of anybody's job. You can probably think of new ways to do things. I just was able to work with the company and getting patents on it. Now, I'll have to say, my last patent had nothing to do with that. It was another idea that had been brewing in my mind. And it's a biomass patent where I basically take a field of green product, we'll say corn, and in 24 to 72 hours, convert it to a liquid, a pumpable liquid, and alcohol, if that's your goal.
Well, okay.
And that was an issue until 2 years after I retired. It takes years sometimes to work on complex patents with, I can't remember, 20 different claims on it, different claims on all my design patents, or all my engineering patents and process patents.
That's really important right there. The fact that some things take time, and it's really good to just really just make a move ahead of time so that way you'll be prepared. So when that opportunity strikes, you already have what you need out there.
Yeah, and it ties in with the two books that I released 2 years ago, Culture and the Mysterious Agent Changing It. There's different things going on in culture, and that agent, I write the book as a mystery, and 20 of the 22 chapters start as a riddle. And so you try to figure out, as I did, my basic question: what's changing culture? It's different than it used to be. What's changing it? And so it is a riddle, and people find the answer, at least the answer that I come up with, by reading the book. And then I migrated to learning. My second book in that series was Learning as it Influences the 21st Century. And you just hit on some of the things. If you're going to patent something, you better learn something in order to see if it's different than anything out there. And if it's not patentable. If it's already in common use, it's not patentable. But people are amazing, the things that they come up with. Now, my handlebar, yeah, I come up with it, in an hour and put it on the next hour, and it worked. I still use it 2 years later. So these are the things that anybody can do, but in their own specialty. At least I believe that.
That's what I'm talking about right there. And it's good that you encourage folks that they can do that because we all have creative minds that we just don't tap into. So what keeps you creative?
Well, as you age, I think one of the things I want to do, and I think many people do, is keep your mind active. But you can keep your mind active and be so sedentary that your body deteriorates. So it's really a parallel system. And just like in your book, Going North, Tips and Techniques to advance yourself. Well, I unfortunately have not read your book yet. I would look forward to it. But my guess is that you followed primarily an academic route to those tips and techniques. And you can look at my books, my Relating to Ancients series, which is my website, relatingtoancients.com, and I take the intellectual approach in those books. This last fun book, Destination North Pole, is strictly fun, but it is it's a physical motivation. It is something that I think people will read and want to get out and be motivated physically on their own. Besides mentally, like I said, the lessons in this book are far beyond just the physical.
You can say that again. And that's definitely what folks need to lead. And I love what you said there about the mind and the body being a parallel system because it just really stuck out to me. It's like, you know what? That's one of the few things in life that's a straight line when you think about it. It's like you got to really use both. You got to stay in motion to really keep your body and your mind in
It,
motion.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, too many times, maybe in the last few months, because of the pandemic, we're maybe glued to our gadgets more than we should be. And there's shoes by the door that can be used during breaks, whether you're in an office, which most people aren't anymore, and or not in school. And in fact, that's what I described in my books. That not that I predicted a pandemic, Dom, but there's a fundamental changes going on in society because of technology that allow us to break free of those brick and mortar structures. And so I predict again, I wrote about it and what's going to happen to the economy. I talk about how there's no need for brick and mortar schools. If it's strictly a social function, then we find different ways of socializing. But the world, as my patents indicate, other patents indicate, the world seeks the most efficient system. And the most efficient system is not the 20th century transportation system we've developed to transport us, our children, and our spouses to an office or a school. We can do much, much more, far more efficiently in far less time electronically. Will the system change? Certainly. Do I describe exactly how? No. I open people's minds to the idea of how to use their memory and how this system is going to change. And that's why it's my book, Learning as it Influences the 21st Century.
Uh, I'll definitely love it. And you didn't even have to predict the pandemic because the pandemic forced folks to really advance further into having to rely on more creative ways using technology to really get things done and get things accomplished.
You nailed it. You nailed it. It just speeded the transition. It's going to happen anyway. It just speeded the transition. It's absolutely foolish to gather people on a bus, children or teachers, gather people on a bus and haul them to an office or downtown in the city in an office, and then spend an hour doing it or more, and then sit in that brick building and do the same thing in the evening before you get home. That's for the most time, wasted hours. Is there socialization going on? Sure. Is there benefits to that? Absolutely. But you take somebody for 12, 15 years and send them to the same route, to the same building, you're really not expanding your mind. Where I bike to Alaska, I mean, 3,000 miles. Again, most of it is in Canada. There's just so much to see that could I have stayed in front of the TV for those 40 days? Absolutely. Could I stayed on my computer? Sure, I could have wrote another book probably. But I want people to expand their body and their mind in ways they maybe never contemplated when they're following such a strict routine.
That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Always got to expand. And that's the beautiful thing about our minds is like once you really think bigger and see new environments, you really can't go back to what you once were because it's so hard to do.
Well, yes, that's true. And one thing I describe in one of my books is once you turn on the light and shut it off, you can't forget what you've seen. And you see things that is in the back of your mind, and that's what it uses to develop ideas over the long term. And I use the example, what was it? Attention span matters. And then I describe different examples where people are doing little things, now coming up with symbols so they can hurry and communicate on a little tablet or a phone. But that them snippets don't necessarily develop into long-term ideas. And so children independently staying at home, sharing a household and seeing their folks work their butts off on, online. These are experiences that we can't take away. This is going to be with this generation for the rest of their lives. And they're going to see and experience and take responsibility for things that they wouldn't have had the system not forced us into a change the last few months. And regarding those snippets, think of it this way. I use the example of Albert Einstein. Keep in mind that he passed away after my father was born. And so he was a long-term thinker. From 1907 to 1915, he developed the theory of gravitation, gravitational waves that refuted the 300-year-old Newton theory. And so I got thinking about that, and I go, wow, he can't convince people this is right. His ideas took him years. And then finally in 1916, a year later, he wrote those ideas down. It took 100 years to 2016 for science to prove his gravitational theory was correct. These are the types of long-term thoughts that we need to develop. Everybody needs to develop, especially those in school. So when they get out, they can think how the society is going to develop and how they can use their talents to make their life and the society in general better.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about. So
Well,
it's
excuse me, didn't your book, and I'm curious, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, it almost sounds like I wrote a book going north to Alaska, destination North Pole. And then I talk about learning as it influences the 21st century or culture and the mysterious age and changing it. The whole purpose of that book, wasn't it, to help people advance themselves, like I just suggested?
yes, sir.
Good for you. Good for you. Congratulations. I look forward to reading it.
Thanks a bunch. It's on audio too, in case you want to listen to it if you
Okay,
don't have time to read it.
Good.
I'm glad that message was clear enough. Didn't want to put anything out there that was clear as mud.
Well, no, that's good. I have when I've done long distance driving, I have done a lot. Listen to audiobooks. I tend to read because each book that I read for the last 30 years or so, I take notes. And so that's how I developed some of the background for these books, and I have lots of references. Speaking of driving, I talked about bicycling to North Pole, but really this was two people doing it. My wife caught up with me in Western Saskatchewan, and she drove the 3,000 miles on her own, experienced things that I didn't experience. She took off when she wanted to. She ate where she wanted to. She hiked where she wanted to. She met people that I didn't get to meet. And so there could be a book just on her individual 3,000-mile adventure. Did she catch up with me a couple times during the day? Yes. Usually, she'd seen me off 5 in the morning or something like that. Sometimes we went back to bed. Other times she looked around, stopped at shops, went on hikes, did a little bicycling, went ahead, caught up with me, maybe brought me a roll or a sandwich, went and found food and lodging that night and told me where it was, and I biked to it. And these are the things that you can use a book like yours that is on audio and drive to Alaska on your own or with a companion, a friend or a spouse, and experience the same thing. It doesn't have to be Alaska. It can be any place. And use the tools like your audiobook to expand the mind at the same time. You're seeing scenery like my background, palm trees in Florida. You don't see in your country these days, but it's an experience. I'll just put it that way.
That's right. Definitely a learning one. Definitely a learning one.
Yeah,
And
sure is.
heck of a good experience too. And
Our whole life is learning, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you can say that again. It's like every day, like could learn something new, even if it's a small thing. It's like, especially when it just comes to the note taking and the journaling piece. I'm probably sure you probably do journaling every day, don't you?
I did on the trip to Alaska, but it's the first time in my life I did it. I just have never written a journal. Now, how did I get the details of this book? I did a spreadsheet where, and when I took off, how long I biked, the elevation, the calories I burned, the speed, that's data details that it just takes a teeny little part at the beginning of the book, at the beginning of each chapter. And so if you're a bicyclist, you can look at that. The rest of them don't care. They're wanting to know what happened, what grizzly bears did today, what black bears and wolves and wood bison and moose and what I experienced, who I seen. So you have to keep your reader interested. And so just like an audio show, you have to read that with a intent to keep people interested. Isn't that the whole point of writing? And it probably helps clear our writing too, had we each done that audio part of it.
Oh yeah, you could definitely say that again. And then speaking of books, are there any more books in the future for you that's waiting to come out?
I'll say that I'm always going to write, whether I actually publish them or not. For the public, yes, I intend to write other ones. How I'll, my Relating to Ancient series, I have several started, and how they're going to develop, we'll have to see. But the first two, Culture and the Mysterious Age of Changing It, and Learning as It Influences the 21st Century, came out in the last 2 years. And there's just so many fundamental things in that I think people will read every page and get something out of it. That was my goal. And some pages you may take an hour to read just because there's a lot of things to think about.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Definitely right about that. Well, looking forward to them if they decide to see the light of day and come out the metaphorical cave.
Hey, well, um, there are so many books out there and so many different topics. And so I have never written to in a genre that I have to follow these guidelines. I wrote it where I thought I enjoyed it, and the people that read it enjoy it. I had a lady come to our bookstore, closed down in Pierre this spring. Unfortunately, it closed down, and so I went to the bike shop, talked to Tom, and said, Tom, he helped me out with bike parts and tubes and things like that. And I said, could I have a book signing here? He goes, sure. So we scheduled a book signing, and there was an 80-year-old lady that came to it and bought my book. She'd heard about it in the paper, and she bought my book. And a couple of weeks later, I seen her. We were actually on a picnic, and I seen her, and she said, I got that book, and I read it in one night. I finished that book. It was really good. This is a lady that 80-year-old, never been on a bicycle in her life probably, but enjoyed the book. So to me, that shows that I actually the book connects with people whether they have ever been on a bicycle.
There you go. That power of connection, baby. That power
Yeah,
of connection.
there you go, Don.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but this time in the current year with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Keep active physically and mentally.
There you go. Platinum, baby.
All right. Maybe shorter than people expect, but that's you do those two things and your mind will explore things that you never imagined. You will learn things, you will experience things, you will see things, you will go places, whether it's going places in a book or going places physically that you will never regret.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Woo! So, for those who want to pick up this exciting book with this exciting bike ride with all sorts of
Yeah.
hundreds of miles in it, what's the best way, folks, to grab it and keep in contact with you?
The easiest way is to get my books. Most people go to Amazon and just type in my last name or destination North Pole, 5,000 kilometers by bicycle. I have a YouTube video out. My nephew, grandnephew, when we got back, took my wife and my video clips and put them into a YouTube video, short little YouTube video with the scenes of the bears and the the scenery is just wonderful, short little videos. So go to YouTube, enter my last name, Wietgrefe. Book CH is my New York distributor, bookch.com. And then go to my website, relatingtoancients.com, and explore the whole series of things, some audio, some videos, some presentations, relatingtoancients.com.
Sweet. Well, there you have it, folks. Destination North Pole, baby. That's right. That's right indeed. It doesn't even have to worry about seeing Santa Claus. It's all about the knowledge from a bike ride.
But you get to see him up there because that's the name of the town, North Pole, and there are a lot of things to see in that small little town. And one of them is the reindeer and the Santa Claus house and everything else that I passed on the way into town. My nephew, niece, and 3 grandnieces have been up there now 14 years, I guess it is. And so that's why the book was called Destination North Pole, because I wanted to go to North Pole, and it was a good destination. So the book is such an endearing, fun, humorous, adventurous book. It's for everybody.
Ah, sweet. That's what I'm talking about. Well, there you have it, folks. Go ahead and grab some magical copies. So, any closing thoughts before we stop the recording, Gary?
No, except that I want to thank you for hosting me. Our books, our mental processes, I think, parallel. Yours going north, mine destination North Pole. One physical, one academic, but I think they're on parallel tracks. And let's just keep doing it. Look forward to visiting with you again.
This is your host, Don Brabin. Hope you enjoyed what you just heard. And if you really did, do me a solid and leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, wherever you're listening to. And subscribe to hear more, because more is coming your way to advance you further than before.